Every society has a breaking point when it comes to people just hanging around. Instead of actually fixing the underlying issues of poverty or lack of housing, lawmakers throughout history have chosen the path of ultimate pettiness. We are looking at the ridiculous laws about beggars, vagrants, and loitering that prove how terrified authorities are of people who simply exist in public without a money. You are about to discover how the legal system actively criminalized empty pockets and free time. 1. Under the United Kingdom's legendary Vagrancy Act of 1824, you can be criminally charged for sleeping in a barn, a cart, or a pigsty without a very good, legally binding excuse. This deeply bizarre piece of legislation was initially designed to crack down on homeless veterans returning from the devastating Napoleonic Wars. Instead of providing proper pensions or housing for soldiers who just survived the Battle of Waterloo, the government decided to make their homelessness a punishable offense. But the most absurd part is that local lawmakers somehow felt an overwhelming need to explicitly protect the local livestock from unsolicited human roommates. Imagine surviving artillery fire across Europe, only to return home and get a permanent criminal record just because you crashed out next to a sleeping hog. It makes you question what kind of rural farmyard drama was unfolding in the 1820s to warrant such oddly specific legal boundaries. 2. Detroit once had a local ordinance making it illegal to loiter around a morgue or undertaker's establishment. Unlike most loitering laws aimed at protecting shops and businesses, this one specifically targeted funeral homes. Historians believe the rule was meant to discourage crowds, gawkers, and people gathering around locations connected to deaths and funerals. The result is one of the strangest anti-loitering laws ever written. In theory, spending too much time lingering outside a mortuary could attract the attention of police. Most cities worry about people hanging around shopping centers. Detroit apparently had to worry about people hanging around embalming rooms. 3. If you think modern panhandling laws are a bit harsh, let's rewind to 16th century England under the reign of King Henry VIII. The royal government officially categorized all vagrants into two distinct groups: the legitimately sick, who were graciously granted official licenses to beg, and the so-called sturdy beggars, who were simply able-bodied people unable to find employment. The penalty for being a sturdy beggar was unimaginably extreme and escalated with terrifying speed. On your first offense, you faced severe, deeply humiliating physical punishment in the public square. If you were caught struggling to survive a second time, authorities would permanently brand you with a hot iron to ensure you were visually marked for life as a complete societal failure. And on your third offense, the state would impose the absolute ultimate penalty, permanently and fatally removing you from the kingdom altogether. The royal government essentially treated temporary unemployment as an unforgivable crime against the crown. It definitely makes a modern $50 municipal loitering citation seem like an absolute luxury vacation by comparison, doesn't it? 4. In 19th century France, escaping the incredibly strict vagrancy laws required you to carry a specific domestic passport known as a livret. This heavily regulated little booklet detailed your entire employment history and acted as undeniable proof that you were an active, contributing member of the national workforce. If a police officer randomly stopped you on a Parisian street and your livret was missing, incomplete, or slightly out of date, you were instantly classified as a dangerous vagabond and thrown directly into prison. The French government essentially treated being temporarily between jobs as a literal crime against the state. You could not freely move to a new city to seek a better life without a former employer officially signing off on your travel papers. Imagine living in a society where needing a gap year or simply taking a few weeks to figure out your next career move made you a prime target for law enforcement. Needing a passport just to take a leisurely afternoon stroll is the ultimate form of bureaucratic paranoia. 5. Many modern American cities enforce deeply bizarre, vehicular vagrancy laws that explicitly criminalize the act of sleeping inside your own legally parked car. The financial contradictions here are absolutely staggering. You can pay tens of thousands of dollars for the vehicle, diligently pay your annual registration fees, and feed expensive quarters into the city parking meter. But the exact second you recline your seat and close your weary eyes, you are suddenly classified as an illegal lodger. The municipal law basically dictates that automobiles are strictly for sitting while remaining highly alert. It is wildly absurd that you can be heavily fined for taking a desperate, entirely harmless nap inside your own private mobile property. The city is perfectly happy to take your money for the parking space, but they draw a hard legal line at you actually experiencing physical comfort while occupying it. 6. A shocking number of modern municipalities have essentially made it illegal for ordinary citizens to be too generous to local vagrants. Under incredibly strict food-sharing ordinances in various urban centers, handing out free meals in public parks to the unhoused without securing a massively expensive municipal permit is an officially punishable offense. The local government essentially claims that giving away a simple turkey sandwich is an unregulated public event that aggressively encourages illegal loitering. You could be facing severe financial penalties or even arrest just for trying to ensure someone doesn't starve on a park bench. It completely strips away the humanity of the situation, transforming an act of basic compassion into a complex bureaucratic violation. Isn't it profoundly dystopian that offering a hungry person a leftover slice of pizza can legally classify you as a rogue public nuisance, actively undermining neighborhood security? It truly makes you wonder if our laws are designed to solve poverty or simply to hide it from plain view. 7. Victorian England devised a brilliantly cruel and highly industrious punishment for convicted vagrants, the infamous penal treadmill. Able-bodied beggars who were arrested for loitering were forced into grueling labor, made to walk for endless hours on massive, rotating wooden cylinders. These were not just pointless torture devices, they were actually geared mechanisms used to generate literal power for local corn mills or to pump water for the prison system. If you were caught lingering on the cobblestone streets without a single penny to your name, the British state effectively turned your physical exhaustion into a free municipal energy source. They looked at a starving, exhausted population and saw an untapped electrical grid. 8. Portland, Oregon, once struggled with a highly controversial and deeply confusing loitering ordinance regarding public bus stops. The city made it a punishable offense to linger inside a transit shelter if you were not actively waiting to board a bus. But here is the magnificently absurd catch. If a bus pulled up to the curb and you did not immediately get on it, police officers could automatically assume you were illegally loitering and issue you a hefty citation on the spot. You were strictly not allowed to wait there for a friend, dodge a sudden torrential downpour, or simply wait for a different bus route. Miss your specific bus, catch a municipal fine. It created a completely Kafkaesque nightmare for public transit users. 9. In modern parts of the United Kingdom, police have utilized sweeping anti-social behavior legislation to crack down on begging in the most extreme and baffling ways possible. Authorities now have the power to issue a public space protection order, which essentially bans virtually any specific action they deem mildly annoying within a designated zone. In some bustling town centers, it is now completely illegal to sit on the floor while holding a paper cup, an upturned hat, or even a completely blank piece of cardboard. The law preemptively assumes the cardboard itself is a dangerous weapon of financial extortion. You don't even have to ask anyone for money. The mere implication that you might want a coin is enough to break the law. 10. Early American legal codes included the extremely vague and deeply paranoid crime known simply as nightwalking. In early colonial settlements, casually strolling through the unlit streets after dark without a visibly valid and urgent purpose was considered highly suspicious and entirely illegal. This rigid law assumed that innocent, God-fearing people had absolutely no logical reason to be awake and outdoors after the sun went down. The authorities believed the night belonged exclusively to criminals, conspirators, and thieves. If you were just a restless insomniac seeking a peaceful midnight walk to clear your head, or an artist looking for some quiet inspiration beneath the stars, the local night watchman could literally throw you in the town jail until dawn to protect the public order. Sleep deprivation was basically a legal hazard that could ruin your reputation. It forces you to realize how historically recent the concept of nightlife actually is. Centuries ago, merely enjoying the moonlight was considered a massive threat to civic stability. 11. In 18th century France, under the famously extravagant reign of King Louis XV, the official penalty for vagrancy was physically and permanently branded right onto your skin. If you were caught wandering the countryside without a valid, recognized profession, royal authorities would literally brand the letter V for vagabond onto your chest or shoulder using a red-hot iron. This agonizing punishment ensured that no matter what new city you walked into, trying to start fresh, everyone instantly knew your legal status as a professional drifter. It was a brutal, permanent resume trait that you could never erase, effectively blacklisting you from decent society forever. Imagine trying to get a job interview when your criminal record is literally seared into your epidermis. The monarchy treated poverty not as a temporary struggle, but as a permanent, infectious disease that needed a visible warning label. Would a modern equivalent essentially be the government forcefully tattooing a terrible credit score right onto someone's forehead? 12. In a display of historically bizarre municipal logic, the famously orderly city of Munich once tried to completely solve its urban vagrancy problem by issuing official, government-sanctioned begging licenses. Back in the early 20th century, you could not just ask for spare change on a whim. You actually had to go down to the city hall, register with local bureaucratic authorities, fill out endless paperwork to prove your utter destitution, and then wear a highly visible special metallic badge just to legally panhandle on the streets. This essentially turned the desperate act of begging into a highly regulated, tightly controlled bureaucratic profession. If a police officer caught you asking for coins without your government-mandated poverty badge proudly displayed on your coat, you were immediately arrested for unauthorized solicitation. It completely stripped the spontaneity out of charity. 13. Believe it or not, simply sitting down to rest on the grand exterior steps of a church can easily get you hit with a costly loitering citation in several major urban centers today. Historically speaking, churches have always been viewed as the ultimate untouchable sanctuary for the poor, the weary, and the desperate. But modern municipal zoning codes often strip away that sacred status, legally treating religious steps and courtyards just like the pavement outside any private corporate bank or commercial shopping mall. If you are deeply exhausted from a long walk and just need a quiet stone staircase to rest your aching legs for 10 minutes, city police can legally force you to move along or face a trespassing fine. It is incredibly ironic and deeply sad that the ultimate architectural symbol of infinite grace and charity is legally required to reject tired legs in the name of neighborhood aesthetics. You are totally welcome to seek spiritual salvation inside, but heaven forbid your physical shadow temporarily inconveniences the public right-of-way. 14. Back in the early 20th century, the state of Nevada had a truly dystopian approach to loitering that sounds like it belongs in a dark science fiction novel. Under the Vagrancy Act of 1909, anyone classified as a vagrant by local authorities could be swiftly arrested and then legally rented out for hard manual labor. Private citizens could basically walk up and hire arrested loiterers directly from the local sheriff to clean up their messy yards, chop wood, or work on grueling construction projects. It was a massive municipal loophole that turned a simple lack of a permanent address into an involuntary, unpaid job placement program. The legal system completely eliminated the vital boundary separating public safety from state-sanctioned forced labor. 15. Public libraries are traditionally celebrated as the ultimate, welcoming safe havens for the community. But many modern municipal codes explicitly and aggressively criminalize loitering among the dusty bookshelves. If you are caught merely resting your heavy eyes, staring blankly out a frosty window, or utilizing the quiet space without actively consuming educational materials, you can be legally trespassed by the head librarian. The local law fiercely demands constant, verifiable intellectual engagement. Using a taxpayer-funded library merely to comfortably escape the freezing winter wind instantly transforms you into an illegal vagrant in the eyes of the city. You cannot just exist peacefully surrounded by literature. You must actively perform the act of reading to justify your bodily presence. The government basically mandates that your brain must be actively sweating if you want to enjoy their free indoor heating. 16. In ancient Athens, the legendary lawmaker Solon hated the very concept of loitering so passionately that he made simple idleness an actual highly punishable crime against the state. If you were caught loitering in the city square, or generally doing absolutely nothing productive on 3 separate occasions, you were completely stripped of your civil rights. The ancient Greeks essentially believed that if you were not actively contributing your energy to the betterment of society, you absolutely did not deserve the privilege to participate in its democracy. You could lose your right to vote, your right to speak in the assembly, and your legal standing, all because you took too many leisurely naps in the afternoon sun. They viewed extreme laziness as a highly contagious civic poison. Imagine the absolute chaos if modern governments suddenly decided to permanently revoke your voting rights just because you spent way too many consecutive hours lounging aimlessly at a suburban bus stop. Would anyone you know actually survive this ancient legal standard? 17. The absolute, undisputed grandfather of all these deeply bizarre public regulations is the infamous English Ordinance of Laborers, brutally enacted way back in 1349. Following the massive, apocalyptic devastation of the Black Plague, healthy laborers were incredibly scarce and finally started demanding much higher, livable wages. To ruthlessly force people back to work at the old, incredibly low rates, the panicked royal government made it a severe, highly punishable crime to give any charitable alms to an able-bodied beggar. The royal law did not just financially punish the hungry vagrant, it actively and aggressively criminalized the beautiful, fundamental act of human charity itself. Giving a desperately hungry, wandering man a simple piece of stale bread literally made you an active enemy of the medieval economic state. The king essentially declared that unregulated kindness was a massive threat to the national economy. It is completely mind-blowing to realize that outlawing basic human compassion was one of the very first economic recovery plans in recorded history. 18. The state of Arkansas once enacted a bizarrely specific and highly controversial law specifically targeting people who beg from the windows of vehicles. The state made it utterly and completely illegal to approach a car that is stuck in heavy traffic or stopped dead at a red light to ask for charitable donations, offer windshield washing services, or even just to peacefully pass out informational flyers. State lawmakers cleverly framed this as a severe, life-or-death traffic safety issue, completely ignoring the blatant physical reality that the cars in question were already entirely stationary. The legislation essentially implies that people walking on the sidewalk are totally fine to beg from, but citizens sitting comfortably in their locked, climate-controlled sedans are somehow too emotionally fragile to be approached by the lower classes. It creates a weird legal bubble around automobiles, declaring that the exact second you sit behind a steering wheel, you are legally immune from having to acknowledge urban poverty. 19. During the deeply cynical Victorian era, British authorities grew deeply paranoid about an alleged underground network of professional beggars who supposedly faked severe physical disabilities to scam the gullible public. The police routinely arrested disabled individuals under incredibly harsh vagrancy laws merely on the passing suspicion that their severe limp or blindness was entirely theatrical. Plainclothes police officers would literally stalk disabled citizens through the cobblestone streets, hiding in the shadows and waiting for a miraculous, fake recovery when the beggar thought nobody was watching. The legal burden of proof shifted so dramatically during this moral panic that genuinely disabled people constantly had to legally prove their immense physical misery was authentic, just to avoid being thrown into a grim workhouse. Imagine having to aggressively demonstrate your own agonizing pain to a deeply skeptical police officer just to legally justify your right to sit on a public sidewalk and ask for a copper coin. 20. During the glorious reign of Queen Elizabeth I, the art of acting was surprisingly considered such a shady, deeply disreputable profession that traveling actors were legally classified as common vagabonds. Unless a theater troupe had the explicit, written, and highly expensive patronage of a high-ranking nobleman, any actor caught wandering from town to town could be immediately arrested, physically branded, or heavily fined as an illegal beggar. The royal government essentially viewed professional pretend as just another highly deceptive form of public loitering. It is wild to think that the brilliant colleagues of William Shakespeare, men who were performing some of the greatest literature in human history, had to constantly secure elite royal backing just to avoid being publicly whipped in the local town square. The authorities basically stated that unless a wealthy duke personally vouched for your artistic value, your theatrical performance was legally indistinguishable from a panhandler aggressively demanding spare change. 21. Many suburban American municipalities have actively weaponized highly restrictive loitering laws, specifically to target day laborers seeking daily employment. Local ordinances strictly forbid standing on certain residential street corners or waiting near massive hardware stores if your sole, obvious purpose is to wait for a passing independent contractor to offer you a temporary cash-paying job for the afternoon. Earning an entirely honest living through casual, grueling physical labor is suddenly and inexplicably classified as a nefarious public nuisance. The municipal law aggressively punishes highly ambitious people purely for having the sheer audacity to look for hard manual work without the luxury of a climate-controlled corporate office building or a polished digital resume. You are literally just standing there, offering your sweat and muscle to the local economy. But the local police view your proactive work ethic as a criminal threat to suburban aesthetics. Is it not incredibly bizarre that trying your absolute hardest to avoid being unemployed is legally treated exactly the same as malicious vagrancy? 22. For decades, police departments across America enthusiastically enforced vague vagrancy laws using a completely arbitrary and highly discriminatory financial metric called having a visible means of support. If a patrolling officer randomly stopped you for suspected loitering, you often had to physically produce a specific amount of cash on the spot, usually ranging from $20 to $50 in your wallet, just to legally prove you weren't a desperate vagrant. If your pockets were completely empty, you were going straight to the local jail. It was literally a punishable crime to be broke in a public space. The authorities essentially instituted a mandatory financial cover charge just for the basic privilege of walking down a municipal sidewalk. Imagine the sheer panic of checking your wallet and realizing you are exactly $5 short of legally existing in your own neighborhood. 23. Major transit hubs worldwide have aggressively waged a silent architectural war against the very concept of lingering. In many grand European and American train stations, city planners have completely and intentionally removed all public seating just to discourage unauthorized loitering. The official, unspoken policy is that you should only be allowed inside the sprawling station if you are moving briskly and purposefully toward a departing train. If you happen to arrive an hour early for a scheduled departure, you are ruthlessly forced to aimlessly pace the echoing halls or stand awkwardly against a marble pillar, looking exactly like a suspicious, nervous spy. The authorities literally made massive, taxpayer-funded public spaces intensely uncomfortable on purpose, just to keep the unhoused population far away from commuters. They decided that punishing absolutely everyone with chronic leg pain was a perfectly acceptable price to pay for a pristine, sterile aesthetic. Why do we consistently design modern cities to be as physically hostile as possible to the human body? 24. Under specific, highly controversial anti-social behavior laws in the United Kingdom, using a dog to gather public sympathy while begging is heavily penalized by local authorities. City officials genuinely argued that panhandlers were cynically exploiting innocent pets to artificially increase their daily revenue, essentially treating adorable puppies like furry, highly effective corporate marketing tools. If a passing police officer personally decides your loyal dog is looking a little too intentionally sad or photogenic on the pavement, you can instantly face severe financial fines and even have the beloved animal permanently confiscated by the state. It brings up a deeply weird and highly subjective legal question. At what exact measurable point does holding a cute terrier on your lap cross the line from standard companionship into illegal, weaponized emotional manipulation? The law literally requires police to evaluate a dog's facial expressions to determine if a petty crime is currently in progress. Imagine getting a court summons because your golden retriever has aggressively pathetic puppy eyes. 25. In 19th century America, several clever charity organizations actively tried to hack the strict municipal vagrancy laws by issuing their very own custom begging tokens. Instead of giving desperate beggars illegal street cash, wealthy and morally concerned citizens bought specific wooden or metallic tokens to hand out on the sidewalk. The beggar could then exchange these highly regulated tokens at specific charity houses for a warm bowl of soup or a safe bed for the night. This totally bypassed the strict anti-panhandling laws, miraculously creating a bizarre, completely parallel urban economy based entirely on heavily monitored charity currency. It was basically a strict Victorian version of a modern retail gift card, meticulously designed to ensure the donated money was never, ever spent on unapproved local vices like alcohol or gambling. The wealthy elites found a way to be generous while still maintaining absolute, patronizing control over exactly how the poorest members of society were allowed to legally consume their daily calories. 26. In several major American cities, spanning from the late 19th century right up until the surprisingly recent 1970s, the infamous ugly laws strictly and aggressively regulated public spaces. It was explicitly, undeniably illegal for anyone officially deemed unsightly, diseased, or visibly physically disabled to appear in the public streets, especially to beg for survival. The municipal law essentially penalized highly marginalized people purely for lacking conventional aesthetic appeal, treating tragic physical misfortune as an unbearable, highly offensive civic nuisance. The local government genuinely believed that protecting the delicate sensibilities of wealthy shoppers was far more important than the basic civil rights of disabled citizens. How exactly did municipal leaders legally and scientifically quantify a severe lack of attractiveness without sounding completely, cartoonishly unhinged in a courtroom? They literally made it a punishable crime to exist if your face or body made a passing aristocrat feel even slightly uncomfortable on their way to the theater. 27. The infamous Byzantine Emperor Justinian took a ruthlessly bureaucratic and wildly unethical approach to able-bodied beggars back in the 6th century. He firmly decreed that any healthy, capable person caught begging in the grand streets of Constantinople was to be immediately seized and forced into grueling public works. But here is the truly bizarre dystopian twist to this ancient legislation. Whoever actively reported the beggar to the authorities was legally granted permanent ownership of that person as a personal laborer. The empire brilliantly but cruelly incentivized ordinary citizens to aggressively snitch on panhandlers by actively rewarding them with free human labor. It was a vicious civic bounty hunter system built entirely on neighborhood spite and sheer economic greed. Imagine walking down the street and realizing your neighbors are constantly sizing you up, just waiting for you to look desperate enough to legally enslave. Can you even fathom the sheer level of paranoia this created among the lower classes of the Byzantine Empire? 28. Across various states and tourist-heavy municipalities, casually loitering in a grand hotel lobby without a booked room is fiercely criminalized specifically to protect wealthy, paying tourists from local panhandlers. You cannot simply walk off the bustling street into a luxurious, beautifully air-conditioned hotel to admire the stunning architectural design, desperately use the marble restroom, or comfortably sit on a plush velvet sofa to temporarily escape the brutal summer heat. The exact moment the highly trained concierge realizes you do not possess an active, incredibly expensive room key, your innocent, harmless rest stop instantly transforms into a blatant act of illegal trespassing. High-end premium comfort is strictly and unapologetically gatekept by the heavy hand of the law. The city actively ensures that the most comfortable, beautiful indoor spaces in the entire neighborhood are legally walled off from the very people who might actually need 5 minutes of peaceful rest, the absolute most. If your wallet is empty, the elegant velvet ropes quickly turn into invisible iron bars. All right, we have covered 28 rules, and there is only one final point left. But before we hit number 29, it is time for our final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the absolute most baffling law from today's list goes to the infamous ugly laws. Simply because legally criminalizing someone's aesthetic appearance is the absolute peak of municipal arrogance and historical cruelty. Do you agree with our verdict? Or are we totally off base? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And now, our final number. 29. In numerous wealthy, highly manicured suburban towns, romantic strolling musicians who politely ask for tips are legally completely indistinguishable from aggressive, threatening beggars. If you slowly walk down a quiet residential street, beautifully playing an acoustic guitar and merely hoping for some loose change from people peacefully sitting on their front porches, you are blatantly violating strict, highly punitive anti-solicitation ordinances. Rigid lawmakers formally decided that bringing unsolicited, joyful acoustic music to a quiet neighborhood is absolutely not a charming cultural experience, but rather a deeply annoying and strictly forbidden vagrancy violation. Uninvited, cheerful serenades will shockingly quickly get you a very tense police escort straight to the town border. The authorities basically decided that if the neighborhood did not actively hire you through a licensed entertainment agency, your guitar is legally classified as a weapon of massive public irritation. You better keep your impromptu acoustic concerts entirely inside your own soundproof garage. Ultimately, vagrancy and loitering laws are just a tool to legally sweep society's problems out of sight. We criminalize the symptom instead of treating the disease, making public spaces completely hostile to anyone without a wallet. So, is it ever actually fair to fine someone for being poor? Tell me what you think in the comments. Subscribe for more bizarre history, and I will see you next time.